What you need to do as far as, let's say you got through the tutorial, there's not really much to tell you about that. It's self-explanatory. But once you get into the open world, okay, and you walk out of either that police station as a hero or that nightclub as a villain, which honestly, walking out of a nightclub sounds far more fire, but just be warned that the villain side um, can take a bit longer to get things done. We'll just put it that way. Um, so choose wisely. Either way, don't worry about role playing too much. There's something I want to touch on, but before we jump into that, like I said, you're new, you're in the open world, you want to go to your journal. So level 1 to level 30, this is where you're going to go. You're going to go into your menu and you're going to go to your journal, which is that little book icon. Now, this is going to be directing you on where you need to go. So follow this. You shouldn't get lost. If you have something in here, make sure you click on it and highlight it. Once you do that, it's going to give you a yellow arrow. Usually, I don't know if I have one that will point me to it. No. So anyways, it'll give you a yellow arrow if there's actually somewhere you need to go, something you need to do in the open world, and it'll point you in that direction. And that's pretty much it. Follow the journal missions. They will get you to progress organically through the primary story, which is basically just a very long tutorial, level 1 to level 30, of trying to learn how to play the game, right? It'll introduce you to your powers and things like that. So that's it. As far as leveling, you need to focus on getting level 1 to level 30, and that will just keep you moving forward. That's the simplest way I can put it. Now, if you have questions, of course, there's probably going to be a lot of videos that show you where to go, what to do, things like that. We do have an actual official DC Universe Online Discord. Um, it is community ran, so the official Discord. There's a lot of helpful people in there. There's even a new player questions channel, so definitely jump into that if you do have questions. I highly recommend getting into the Discord. I also have a community Discord dedicated to DC Universe Online, but feel free to come over there and talk about anything. Also, if you have questions, feel free to come by, ask those questions. Otherwise, jump into the main DC Discord. I am in there as well. You can at me. It's at Wooly. I'm the only one named Wooly in there. Unless somebody sees this and they decide to make a second Wooly, in which case, I see you. Okay? So level 1 to level 30, follow your journal missions. It's going to tell you where to go, what to do, how to get to the next spot. That is pretty much it as far as leveling. Once you hit level 30, that's when you are going to get into what's called the end game. What is the end game? The end game is when you start moving through the tiers. So let's say, let's actually just go over here. So you can go to your on duty, which is your little guy with the cape there, little knockoff superhero, right? And you'll see all these different things here to choose from. Let's say if I want to go to custom play, right? So I would go, I want to do some raids. So tier 1, tier 2, so on and so forth. Tier 6 obviously being the latest expansions that have come out over the last couple of years. There's quite a few. Like I said, these are all constantly getting updated. Every few months we get a new episode, which is basically just a DLC or an expansion. Okay, so still getting stuff, still moving forward. Okay, tiers, like I said, this is where you move up. Now, how do you move up past level 30? You technically don't, right? Like if we go and we look at my person here, you see at the bottom, level 30. Okay, but you see where it says equip CR. What is CR? That's combat rating. And my equip combat rating and the PvE player versus environment landscape, which is where you will be doing the tier missions, is 412 on this character. Basically, combat rating is the calculated total of all your gear pieces, right? So let's go and take a look at this. So let's say, essentially, you want to always be getting the highest item level that you can to increase your base gear score, right? So let's say, the easiest way I can explain this is, let's say I have a belt. Like this one is obviously item level 357. You can see that at the very top. where it says item level. So let's say, for example, I have a belt on that's item level, 34, and then I have some boots on that are item level 35. Okay, I run a mission, I complete it, I get a reward. That reward is going to be, in this case, some pants. Well, let's say in this case, for example, it's giving me the option of two different pieces. It's going to give me a belt and boot, in this case. And it doesn't matter which one I choose. It's going to come out to, let's say, item level 35. So obviously, if my belt is item level 34 and my boots are item level 35, if this is going to give me something at item level 37 when I open it up, I'm probably going to want to go ahead and replace the belt, and then that is going to raise my total gear score or combat rating, if you will. So that is actually how you start to level up later in the game, is you are going to be getting better gear. So don't really focus on buying any gear until you get to tier 6 and you get to the latest episode. That is where you will buy gear from. And there are specific currencies that you'll need to do that, but that's something we can talk about later. For now, all I want you to do is focus on getting from level 1 to level 30 and then start increasing your gear score naturally. It's honestly not that long of a grind. If you are efficient and you basically just run stuff, you're going to continuously get better gear. So as long as you run stuff, you'll get there pretty quickly. Okay? So don't worry about it. Don't worry about rushing. Don't worry about putting things like tactical mods in your gear until you start to get up to the 300-400 PvE combat rating range. Okay? That's when you'll need to start focusing on putting stuff into it. Other than that, there is what's called stat points, which you'll need to focus on. And we can do a whole video on stat points where I kind of break it down for you. But essentially, what's important is that you get these, obviously, and we'll talk about how to do that here in just a moment. But what's important is that once you hit level 30, you need to decide what kind of role you want to play. Do you want to play a tank? Do you want to play a healer? Do you want to play a controller, which is crowd control? And that role has kind of changed, so we can also do a separate video on that. Let me know if that's something you want to hear about. You can drop that in the comments. And then, of course, you need to decide if you want to play as a DPS. Now, ultimately, I will always tell you, if you do want to play a support role, it's good to play two roles. It's good to have a DPS build, and then it's good to have your support role. Because if you're playing casually and you're just going into, queuing up missions and things like that, there's going to be a strong chance you're going to run into somebody else running that same role as you. And if you're not a DPS, you don't really need more than one role of that role. So you don't need two healers. You don't need two tanks. Well, you might need two healers, but, more often than not, you don't. You don't need two controllers. What you need is one tank, one healer, one controller, and then DPS. So if there's more than one role and they're not willing to switch, or they don't have the gear to switch, it might be good for you to switch. Otherwise, you can just vote to excuse yourself, or you can just leave, right? But ultimately, decide what kind of role you want to play, and then that's how you will decide where to put your stat points, okay? So like I said, we can talk about stat points later. That's a video that you want to hear more about, how you should be speccing for what role. Drop that in the comments below, and we'll do a separate video on that, okay? But ultimately, like I said, once, 0 to level 1, level 30, focus on your journal missions. That'll get you through. That'll get you to max level. Level 30 onward, focus on replacing your gear with the highest gear pieces that you can, with the highest item level. That'll get your gear, your level up, your gear level up, combat rating, right? And then as you're doing that, like I said, you need to decide what kind of role you want to play. So feel free to go online and look that up. The only thing I can say about that is if you find any kind of guides for certain builds, um, do a little bit of research on it. It's nothing 5 or 10 minutes, of just reading something or watching something isn't going to clarify for you, or get into those Discord and start asking those questions. Because a lot of changes happen, like any live service game, especially with MMOs. Things are constantly getting nerfed, changed, buffed. So if you find a guide that is over a year old, it's most likely outdated. Just this year alone, we've had quite a few changes. I mean, you can play this game for years, take a break, come back 8 months later, and you'll feel like a noob again because you're like, so much has changed. When it hasn't changed too much, but it's changed just enough. So there's always going to be a slight learning curve, but make sure that you are finding the most current guides. Ideally, you want to find something within the last 3 to 6 months for whatever you're trying to find a specific guide for. And that's what you really need to be focusing on. So again, level 1 to level 30, focus on your journal missions. After that, just focus on your gear score to increase your combat rating. And then while you're increasing your gear score, you need to decide what kind of role you want to play. And that brings me to my next point, which is going to be your artifacts. Now, here's the thing about artifacts. We'll have a whole discussion about that for sure. If that is a video that you want to see, again, drop that in the comments below because there's a lot to say about it. But as far as artifacts go, this is where you have fully committed to the role that you've chosen, because these are a big investment. And I'm not even talking about from a money standpoint. Yes, there is money involved if you really want to go that route. You don't need to. There's plenty of guys out there on how to get these leveled up pretty high or even maxed out without ever spending any real money, especially the way the game is now. Just know that it does take a while, which is fine if you're just playing casually and you're not really going into the highest content, which is elite content. You don't really need to worry about that, okay? So don't worry about getting these maxed out, and we'll talk about why. Just level them up as you go. Let's say right now we have double artifact XP going on, so we're getting increased amounts that we can put in there. But that aside, what I'm saying is that artifacts really matter the most when it comes to playing this game. They matter more than stat points. They matter more than gear. None of that really matters compared to artifacts. Artifacts are what you're going to choose when you've fully committed to the role that you want to play. So keep that in mind. Don't just throw these on willy-nilly and start putting stuff into it. You really need to just take some time, take 10 or 15 minutes, and go figure out what artifacts you need for what role you're playing, okay? So those are the basics, guys, on what you need to do to get started in this game and what you should be focusing on, okay? So just kind of wanted to highlight those things. As always, I do want to bring new players in. I want to keep active players playing. So again, if you have questions, drop them in the comments. If not me, somebody else will come by and answer those questions, most likely, because we still have a very dedicated fan base. Of course, there are other resources, my Discord, DC Discord. I'll put my link in the description below for the Discord. Please come by, say what's up. And as always, I am in the main DC Discord. So that's what I got for you today, guys. I want to keep this short and simple and to the point. So, like I said, anything that we kind of touched on here that you want to know more about, it's going to need its own video, because I don't want to make this too long, and I want to keep these videos 10 or 15 minutes at most, because when you're new, things can feel very overwhelming, and you can just get lost, and you have this, just all this information coming at you in a wave. So I like to break it down and give you the basics. So anyways, guys, if you're new to the channel, consider sticking around. If you're new to the game, consider sticking around. And if you're a returning viewer, as always, I appreciate it, but I will catch you next time. Willie out. Stay frosty.